The nameless echo. From chaos, shadows awaken.
At the end of third shift on Penitentiary World Kithera 9, a skull-masked scribe kneels before a consecrated brass brazier and performs his nightly sacrament. Transport manifests, their edges ribboned with grease and administrative seals, go into the flames by the stack. Each yellowed page bears witness to humanity reduced to arithmetic, prisoner designations, cargo tonnages, atmospheric requirements calculated to the cubic meter. The ash rolls over his augmetic gloves, in drifts the color of bone, while recycled incense pushes through the habstacks above, turning the counting house into a chapel of systematic forgetfulness. Across the Imperium's outer darkness, 847 billion souls currently serve penal sentences this standard year, a population larger than 1,000 Hive worlds, yet their presence appears in ledgers more often than in memory. This documentary does not posit these forgotten colonies as mere oversights of bloated bureaucracy. The Imperium does not misplace so many lives by accident. It unthreads them on purpose, refining condemned flesh into labor quotas and deniable force, into ore shipments and bodies that can be spent where the light is thin and records thinner. Our analytical framework treats these penal worlds as dual-purpose infrastructure, simultaneously a brutal apparatus of punishment designed to extract penance through suffering, and an essential component of the imperial war economy, providing vital resources where no other source would suffice. Mining operations requiring hazard pay become cost-effective when staffed by the already dead. Manufacturing processes involving toxic compounds turn profitable when workers' lifespans are measured in months rather than decades. In the margins of burning pages, beneath oil stains and columnar sums, another hand has inscribed cryptic notations, subsection oblivio, query denied. The script is tight and patient, as if afraid even the letters might be overheard. This is not clerical flourish but procedure, invoked rarely, stamped with wax that hardens like a clot. The ritual burning is not waste, but policy written as piety, converting accountability into efficiency through institutional amnesia. The scribe's data slate chirps softly, displaying an irregularity that gnaws at supply schedules. Black Barge St. Doria, now 172 standard days overdue from its scheduled resupply run. No explanation in official logs, no casualty reports. Simply an empty berth in orbital manifests, as if 4,000 transported souls had never existed at all. On Kithera 9, life support augurs already blink amber warnings of cascading shortfalls. The final manifest crumbles between his fingers. He reads designations aloud in neutral tones, offenses, labor assignments, atmospheric rations per head, then adds a personal column no one will audit. Notes of coughs heard, a child's height guessed from recorded stride length. The page flares as he feeds it to consecrated flames curling into brittle crescents as stamps bleed and numbers climb briefly brighter than they were in life. Work is absolution if the ledger remembers, the scribe whispers through ceramic death's head as the page turns to ash. But the ledger remembers just long enough to burn, and with it, countless memories drift through ventilation grills into Kithera 9's recycled atmosphere. Criminality in the Imperium is not a line but a net cast wide enough to drag entire populations through the machinery of systematic utility. In Arbitrator Marshal Vex's precinct on Mordian Prime, morning dockets read like resource allocation matrices rather than moral reckonings. The Lex Imperialis breathes with industrial demand, expanding its definitions of transgression to meet labor quotas with mathematical precision. Violent offenders become shaft cutters, where rockfall claims bodies faster than recruitment can replace them. Tech heretics, tongues severed for whispering unauthorized modifications, find their corrupted knowledge redirected toward imperial manufactorums under neural oversight. Unsanctioned psychers pass to specialized containment where their unstable gifts serve research protocols too classified for standard documentation. This is the doctrine of useful transgression, crime as resource misallocation rather than moral failure. Vex's stylus moves across sentencing matrices with practiced efficiency, each mark a routing code disguised as justice. Consider 3 cases pulled from today's processing queue. A factory worker whose productivity dropped during atmospheric recycler failures, now charged with industrial sabotage through negligence. A void merchant caught trading recycled solvents across tithe boundaries, his numeracy marking him suitable for inventory reconciliation in scarcity operations. A scholar discovered with prescribed agritexts, her literacy valuable for record-keeping, where life expectancy renders education renewable. Transport documents reveal deeper selection criteria. Category Omega stamps appear beside names in red wax, indicating prisoners whose skill sets serve particular colonial appetites. Penitent prime markings, violet sealed on document reverses, suggest algorithms weighing factors beyond simple jurisprudence. These designations operate without explanation in official records, as if predetermined by calculations that treat human capability as extractable commodity. At sentencing, the memoriam protocols commence their systematic subtraction. Birth names are spoken once into sealed recorders, then locked behind triple encryption. Faces are shaved, scars photographed, blood typed, dental patterns etched into ledger margins that will travel nowhere. Personal histories disappear into data vaults, accessible only through subsection oblivio clearance levels. Family records receive amendments showing death by administrative act. Stipends terminate, ration chits recall themselves. A catechism of erasure replaces identity. You are the sum of assigned tasks. You own nothing not issued. You recall nothing not authorized. Designations replace names. Block, bunk, collar, shift numbers burned into flesh via neural interface. The orbital loading docks convert doctrine into physics on industrial scale. Conveyor systems sort human beings like manufactured components, stacking by atmospheric requirements, bundling by projected survival duration, routing by colonial labor demand. Servo skulls drift overhead, calculating cubic capacity and nutritional loads with the same precision applied to munition shipments. Loading supervisor Calix reviews daily tallies on his cogitator. 4,000 souls processed for outer rim deployment. Mortality buffers calculated. Efficiency ratings that optimize human misery as supply chain mathematics. Chains clink under crawler locomotive exhausts while prisoners stand in numbered files. Category Omega forms go into separate satchels. Penitent prime bands receive double verification by clerks with iron spectacles. The condemned board transports that will carry them beyond memory's reach, their transformation from citizens to resources, completing itself in the darkness between stars. What algorithms determine those cryptic classifications? And once memoriam protocols seal behind them, what survives the systematic dissolution of self? Converted cargo haulers stretch across the void like metallic cathedrals of systematic erasure, their holds sectioned by offense tier and projected utility. The penitent's gate carries 4,000 souls in reinforced compartments where violent criminals occupy the crushing lower decks, their movements sluggish under artificial gravity calibrated to sap rebellion. Tech heretics fill mid-tier sections, wrapped in Faraday mesh that sparks against forbidden augmetics. Psychers huddle in lead-lined cells near the ship's heart, their nightmares contained by blessed steel and constant hymnal broadcasts. Red lumen strips mimic days that never arrive, while servo skulls drift on whispering fans, Auspex eyes counting breaths for bridge cogitators that treat human cargo like inventory requiring atmospheric management. Control manifests as architecture. Corridors narrow to single-file choke points every few meters, water issues through needle valves at fixed intervals, enough to prevent kidney failure, insufficient to permit strength. Nutrient paste extrudes by designation number, its flavor altered by compliance metrics recorded in collar mesh networks. Each prisoner couples to the ship's spine through induction plates in the deck, quiet current reminding flesh that one hymn from the machine priest can still rebellious hearts. Transport crews navigate these human cargo holds with practiced indifference born of experience. Most are former penal colonists themselves, survivors who earned limited freedom through decades of compliance, their penal tattoos faded but never removed. Crew Sergeant Morrigan distributes nutrition paste with mechanical efficiency, her mining servo replacement arm, a reminder of Kythera 7's methane explosion. She recites compliance catechisms without malice, only exhausted authority learned through survival that requires converting empathy into procedure. The memoriam protocols advance their systematic subtraction during months of transit. Names spoken at sentencing become forbidden syllables, replaced by alphanumeric designations burned into consciousness through repetitive conditioning. Personal histories undergo pharmaceutical dissolution, childhood memories fade under narcotic fog, family faces blur behind medicinal haze. Imperial doctrine fills resulting voids through constant indoctrination. Work hymns broadcast through ventilation systems, catechisms of penance recited during meal distribution, litanies replacing personal narrative with imperial purpose. Navigation logs reveal troubling supply chain irregularities. The Black Barge St. Doria, scheduled for routine resupply runs to 17 colonies, received emergency rerouting orders under inquisitorial seal. No explanation appears in standard manifests. Her cargo of 4,000 prisoners and 6 months of atmospheric supplements simply vanished from official records, leaving colonies like Kythera 9 facing cascading resource shortfalls. Maintenance kits sit in wrong holds, on wrong ships, while nutrient allotments recalculate to accommodate absence that grows more expensive with each passing day. The voyage measures itself not in time but repetitions. A scholar who mastered crop yields now recites the third penitent cant, unable to recall his sister's handwriting. A stevedore sleeps only when lumen hue turns slate when sermons end. Each learns offerings, sweat to filters, blood to plates, silence to void. As destination beacons pierce the screens, prisoners crowd reinforced viewports witnessing their new damnation. Acid gyres over black water, continents of industrial knives under ember skies. Past lives taper like contrails behind closing airlocks. Systematic transformation complete. The Imperium curates its penal colonies like a vast laboratory of engineered suffering, each world representing a calculated intersection of punishment and industrial necessity. Mordian Tertius weeps acid rain that strips flesh to bone within hours, yet its foundries produce ceramite components, requiring temperatures that would vaporize standard protective equipment. Oceanus Purgata's underwater mining platforms extract nodules from crushing depths, where atmospheric pressure alone kills the unprotected, operations made economical only through expendable labor. Infernus Majoris burns with surface temperatures approaching molten lead, its geothermal plants powered by condemned souls in environmental suits designed to fail within calculated timeframes. The logic of hostile environment selection serves triple imperial purpose. operations requiring hazard pay become profitable when staffed by the already condemned, transforming liability into asset through systematic expendability. These worlds function as unsanctioned testing grounds for extreme condition equipment where prototype failures inform design improvements without political cost or compensation claims. Resource extraction proceeds in zones where standard colonization would demand massive infrastructure investment, costs eliminated by accepting mortality rates that would trigger revolts in civilized space. Environmental compliance reshapes prisoners through relentless biological pressure. Kithra 9's methane atmosphere gradually alters lung capacity and blood chemistry, creating physiological dependence on atmospheric processors that maintain breathable mixtures. Oceanus Purgata's pressure differentials compress skeletal structure over months, making surface return impossible without decompression chambers that exist only in theoretical schematics. Mordian Tertius's acid exposure produces chemical burns that heal into keratinized patches, natural armor enabling longer exposure cycles. Psychology compresses alongside physiology. Hope becomes liability. Individual identity dissolves into collective survival instinct, and personal memory yields to environmental rhythm. Physical parameters of control permeate colonial architecture. Atmospheric processors operate through remote regulation systems that adjust oxygen content, introduce sedative compounds, or trigger complete atmospheric purging within hours of orbital command. Geological surveys identify natural instabilities that prevent escape attempts. Fault lines triggered by seismic charges, unstable cavern systems collapsing under minimal disturbance, volcanic activity channeled through precision demolitions. Indigenous hazards receive careful cultivation, predator populations managed as mobile containment systems, toxic flora seeded near perimeter zones, weather patterns monitored for optimal timing of outdoor assignments. Within this spectrum of systematic brutality, rare exceptions emerge. Sanctuary protocol designations appear sporadically in transport manifests, protecting certain prisoner categories from standard environmental exposure through sealed habitat modules with regulated atmospheric conditions. The criteria remain classified, appearing only as coded annotations in subsection oblivio files. More ominous are Red Protocol emergency procedures scattered throughout administrative records, authorizing immediate atmospheric adjustments, geological destabilization triggers, and indigenous hazard deployment. Red Protocol activation requires dual-key authorization from both colonial command and off-world imperial oversight, suggesting contingencies transcending local authority. Each colony represents environmental weaponization, where natural hostility merges with imperial design to create perfect prisons. Survival depends utterly on imperial infrastructure, fortified hab blocks, rationed supplies, carefully maintained life support systems that can be withdrawn by signal. To step outside authorized zones is to embrace oblivion, a choice few make without imperial permission. But who merits sanctuary protocol protection amid such calculated suffering, and what threshold conditions trigger Red Protocol's ultimate sanctions? Colonial architecture functions as behavioral modification cast in ferrocrete and plasteel, every angle calculated to fragment human will through systematic spatial oppression. Processing centers occupy colony hearts like mechanical cathedrals of erasure, their identity-stripping chambers designed with clinical precision. Curved walls prevent corners where prisoners might huddle for psychological comfort, while harsh lumen arrays eliminate shadows that could conceal whispered resistance. Designation numbers burn into flesh under surgical lumens as servo skulls record biometric data, transforming individual identity into cataloged inventory. Drains slope toward common grates where hair, personal effects, and the detritus of former lives flow together, waste separated from personhood by hydraulics and imperial efficiency. Work zones radiate outward in spoke patterns, enabling total surveillance from central observation towers. Conveyor galleries place laborers under gantries, where overseers pace behind armored glass, their movements tracked by cogitator networks, coordinating enforcement responses. Machine shrines double as listening posts, while prayer rails conceal pickup coils. Every chant becomes microphone test, every genuflection recorded for compliance analysis. Sight lines intersect to dissolve blind corners and manufacture kill lanes where rebellion dies in crossfire geometry. No accident governs these measurements. Even floor plates participate through pressure arrays that register when many feet pause in conspiracy formation. Habitation blocks deny privacy through architectural psychology. Bunks bolt to opposing walls at alternating heights, preventing clustering while aisles narrow to single file, forcing prisoners into vulnerable processions under surveillance nodes. Doors breathe instead of close, slatted vents ensuring conversations leak into corridors where servo skulls drift on whispering fans. Communal latrines open onto main spines, so bodies remain inventory at their most degraded. Lockers operate on unpredictable cogitator schedules, punishing hoarding while defeating planning through randomization algorithms that shatter routine. Chapels occupy every nexus, their vox altars sewn into ventilation runs, where imperial hymns regulate daily rhythm more reliably than chronometers. Incense rations suffuse atmospheric filters with sweetness that signals surveillance. The air itself becomes reminder to obey. Acoustic dampening swallows screams while amplifying administrative commands, creating spaces where imperial doctrine penetrates every corner while private speech becomes impossible. Hierarchy inhabits these corridors as predictably as recycled atmosphere. Wardens, Imperial Guard veterans bearing combat scarring and ceremonial augmetics, hold sanction keys and speak in bombardment grammar from elevated command centers with panoramic work zone access. Arbits-trained overseers patrol through sealed walkways, bypassing prisoner areas entirely, their shotguns loaded with compliance cartridges and liturgies of statute violation. Between authority and the condemned masses stand penitent sergeants, prisoners elevated through collaboration, purchased with architectural rewards. Marginally larger quarters, restricted area access, the rumor of reduced family sentences. Collar mesh systems integrate seamlessly with colony life support through networks embedded within ventilation ducts and power conduits. Each neural collar handshakes with atmospheric processors via induction fields braided through handrails, door frames, and vent grills. A single data bus carrying surveillance metrics, pharmaceutical distribution commands, and sanction authorization. Tech priests can sing hymns through ductwork that every collar receives as neural instruction, while cogitators cross-reference productivity with resource allocation, throttling oxygen mixture and nutrition paste according to compliance databases. These mundane choices aggregate into perpetual anxiety, where survival reduces to technical interface problems, navigate correctly with enclosing systems, or face correction through atmospheric adjustment, pharmaceutical withdrawal, or geological destabilization. Imperial ledgers transform human suffering into acceptable profit margins through calculations that treat condemned flesh as renewable industrial input. On Kythera 9, methane-saturated mining operations extract ceramite precursors worth 14,000 thrones per metric ton. Their profitability derived from labor requiring no wages, pensions, or safety equipment beyond minimal life support. Mordian Tertius forges armor plate blanks under acid rain conditions, where protective gear costs exceed replacement personnel, converting mortality into manufacturing advantage through systematic expendability. Oceanus Purgata's pressure forges achieve molecular densities impossible under standard conditions, prisoner physiology adapting to crushing depths that create expertise purchasable only through brutalization. Material flows extend beyond raw extraction into specialized manufacturing. Colony workshops staffed by tech heretics under neural inhibitors produce precision components too dangerous for civilized facilities. Auspex casings, valve crowns, and reactor baffles stamped with holiness and corrosion both. Quality control operates through Darwinian efficiency, where survivors develop skills no training regimen could replicate. Environmental pressure creating competency through systematic selection. The most disturbing profit streams emerge from human degradation byproducts. Processed biomatter from medical bays and morgues routes through Mechanicus reclamation. Vats emerging as nutrition paste, industrial lubricants, and soil supplements for hydroponic arrays. Psychological conditioning techniques refined through colonial behavioral modification programs sell to commissariat training facilities as enhanced compliance protocols. Even metabolic waste generates revenue. Methane capture systems convert human excrement into atmospheric supplements, closing resource loops through biological efficiency that treats bodies as renewable machinery. Mortality quotas operate through actuarial precision balancing death rates against operational capacity. Kythera 9's optimized calculations settle at 28% annual attrition across all operations, high enough to eliminate long-term obligations while preserving sufficient workforce through coordinated transport schedules. Death becomes scheduled maintenance, factored into budgets alongside equipment depreciation and atmospheric processor fuel costs. Supervisors learn to steer casualties between guardrails through calculated adjustments, extended shifts before efficiency audits, reduced oxygen mixtures during productivity shortfalls, medical triage downgrades that convert injury into elimination. Black market economies flourish within this scarcity framework, converting desperation into secondary profit streams while serving as pressure release valves. Nutrition supplements trade at premium rates. Algae salt bricks and protein slivers worth more than imperial currency, where vitamin deficiency kills faster than industrial accidents. Oxygen credits move like coin on scrap vellum, redeemable at vent grills where penitent sergeants officiate transactions. Religious icons carved from wire offcuts fetch high value during cull rumors, their exchange rates fluctuating with morale levels tracked by surveillance algorithms. Overseers skim their survival tax through selective enforcement, confiscations timed to remind everyone who regulates scarcity. Periodic efficiency assessments evaluate colony performance through matrices weighing extraction against costs, mortality against replacement expenses, compliance against enforcement requirements. Assessment teams arrive aboard unmarked transports, their audits determining funding allocations, personnel assignments, and operational continuity. Failing grades trigger cascading sanctions, transport priority reductions, replacement part delays, punitive sermon extensions. In extreme cases, population rebalancing procedures activate, euphemistic protocols authorizing atmospheric adjustments, nutritional reductions, and accelerated work schedules designed to align population with available resources through systematic culling disguised as operational necessity. Human misery becomes quantified commodity integrated into imperial supply chains where every gasp, every drop of sweat, every silent death feeds the war economy's grinding requirements. The mathematics remain clinical. Optimize suffering for maximum yield while maintaining operational thresholds through calculated human subtraction. Shift horns sound before lumen bars brighten, and Kithra 9 wakes in darkness tasting metal and methane. In Shaft 19, Mining Team Gamma 7 straps rebreathers under scarred collars while Cogitator chimes tally attendance. 8 bodies present, quota recalculated. The slate nailed to bulkhead displays today's mathematics. 640 kilos of ore per gang, 80 kilos per head. Slag contamination tolerance at 5%. Methane at 6,000 parts per million sets toxin threshold. Idleness exceeding 9 seconds triggers collar feedback, escalating from cold bite to white arc. Picks and microcharges work to ventilation rhythm. When green duct banners droop, they stop breathing and keep swinging. Survival taxes emerge through desperate commerce. Theta Red's penitent sergeant bargains with overseers through security grills. 2 oxygen credits for shaped charge crates. Payment flows in contraband salt, shaved from algae bricks. Precious sodium buying 4 additional minutes on life support feeds. Wire Aquilas carved from offcuts trade for ladlefuls of furnace fat. Unofficial calories pushing workers back into acceptable performance tiers. Above ground, slag sorters labor in smelter galleries where heat peels skin like paper. Conveyor 3 demands throughput at 1.6 tons per hour. Error margins flash amber at 2% impurity. Caloric rations tied directly to performance metrics. Tier 1 workers exceeding quota receive 1,250 calories plus vitamin supplements. Baseline Tier 2 earns 1,000 calories. Deficit Tier 3 drops to 750 calories without supplements. The mathematics show on bodies, hollow cheeks, trembling hands. The slow starvation of systematic efficiency. Servo skulls click overhead translating hesitation into ledger debt, while Chapel Vox bleeds compliance litanies between alarm cycles. In atmospheric processor galleries, algae farmers tend biovats that convert human waste into breathable air through biological filtration. Daily quotas demand 4 vats skimmed, 2 membrane filters backflushed, oxygen output raised 0.3% colony-wide. Here, the mechanistic secret reveals itself. Collar mesh networks piggyback on ventilation ductwork, each vent becoming transmitter, each handrail serving as ground. Tech priests move among ducts like red-cloaked weather, intoning machine psalms that ride atmospheric currents. Low hymns in binary become command packets. Oxygen cuts become reprimands. Chords at 32 Hz trigger shutdowns. The system achieves perfect penetration. No corner exists beyond collar mesh reach. No breath drawn without potential monitoring. Tension builds as life support systems strain under cascading failures. The St. Doria's 172-day absence creates widening resource gaps. Atmospheric supplements running low, replacement filters overdue, nutritional stocks approaching critical thresholds. Life support cogitators lower oxygen mix from 18.9 to 18.2%, while CO2 scrubbers cycle at unsafe intervals. Work shifts extend 40 minutes compensating for declining efficiency. Whispers move faster than recycled air. Emergency measures acceptable losses. Red protocols spoken like weather forecasts. Algae yields decline, filter differentials rise. Tech priests review sealed protocols with unusual urgency, while penitent sergeants receive briefings about population optimization procedures. Everyone understands the approaching mathematics. When numbers outrun breath, ledgers demand correction through atmospheric decree alone. Morning shifts begin as always with quotas and collar chimes and grinding survival through compliance. But atmospheric processors wheeze with increasing strain, and the fundamental questions press closer. How exactly does collar mesh splice into atmospheric control spine? When shipments fail, what emergency measures authorize continued operation at the cost of acceptable human losses? At 0347 hours, atmospheric processor 7 coughs black smoke and dies. Without replacement filters delayed aboard the St. Doria, biomembranes clog with accumulated waste, while oxygen production drops 18% colony-wide. Emergency klaxons wail through ventilation ducts as ration dispensers click empty at morning distribution. Nutrition paste reduced from 1,000 calories to 600 per prisoner as supply shortfalls trigger automatic rationing protocols. The cascade has begun. In Shaft 19, methane erupts during a prisoner altercation over water rations. Penitent Sergeant Lisa Vore watches green duct banners sag and knows the mathematics behind the color change. The explosion tears through Mining Team Gamma 7 like invisible flame, igniting respiratory systems while emergency bulkheads slam shut, trapping toxic gas. A boy measured last week by stride length in a scribe's private column does not make the sealed drift. Vore keys the emergency lock and accepts the arithmetic. Saving 5 becomes a form of prayer when the alternative is losing 8. Collar mesh networks overload from simultaneous biotrauma readings, sparking like deadly fireflies throughout the mine complex as neural interfaces short-circuit. The central Vox altar responds with machine psalms in frantic binary cant, chords riding atmospheric currents until every collar receives the transmission as neural command. Prisoners convulse under feedback overload while servo skulls drift overhead, recording mortality statistics for administrative processing. Arbit's Squad Theta deploys into toxic fog wearing rebreathers and carrying riot suppression equipment. Sergeant Kane's tactical display shows atmospheric readings climbing toward lethal concentrations, while prisoner locations scatter across facility maps. Visibility drops to arm's length through methane haze as his squad loses tactical cohesion, their movements becoming isolated firefights against panicking crowds they cannot properly identify. Vox channels fill with contradictory reports, fires, spreading, atmospheric failures cascading, containment capacity exceeded. In the control sanctum, Tech Priest Vex Gamma reviews cascading failure reports across runic keyboards. His cogitator arrays display population optimization matrices. Current life support capacity versus prisoner headcount reveals systematic overload. Red Protocol Sigma 19 appears on his screens, requiring dual authorization, Colonial Command plus off-world Imperial oversight. The authorization arrives within minutes, suspiciously fast for standard bureaucratic channels, bearing 3 different command signatures with overlapping timestamps. Red Protocol activation triggers atmospheric lockdown as blast doors segment the colony into isolated zones. Section by section atmospheric purging begins with clinical efficiency. Oxygen cuts to Zone 7, nitrogen flooding in Zone 12, CO2 scrubber shutdowns creating suffocation chambers disguised as equipment failures. Population rebalancing proceeds through systematic elimination, matching reduced life support capacity with calculated human subtraction. Simultaneously, an Officio Perfectus transport emerges from warp space, its black livery stark against Kythera 9's failing orbital defenses. The timing appears coincidental. Scheduled redemption lottery selections proceeding despite colony crisis. Prisoners crowd chapel spaces as Chaplain Mordax announces salvation through service, volunteers stepping forward believing they choose spiritual redemption over industrial damnation. The dual crisis reveals Imperial efficiency in crisis management. Emergency calls provide fresh bodies for military recruitment, while reducing resource strain through systematic elimination. Surviving prisoners receive explosive anklets and Officio Perfectus tattoos, their transport to active war zones disguised as spiritual elevation. They cannot comprehend the true mathematics, volunteering for penal legion conscription versus death by atmospheric adjustment. The system converts crisis into resource optimization, human suffering refined into military assets, while maintaining operational capacity through calculated murder. As atmospheric purges seal off sectors, condemning thousands to asphyxiation, the prefectus officers complete their selections from survivors. The lottery reveals itself as recruitment through manufactured desperation, converting emergency into strategic opportunity. Who authorized Red Protocol so quickly, and why do authorization records show contradictory signatures? Where exactly do redemption lottery winners go once their transport disappears into warp space? Administrative archaeology exposes Kythera 9's crisis as institutional theater masquerading as emergency response. 3 authorization signatures claim Red Protocol authority within overlapping timestamps. Warden Commandant Voss at 0349 hours, Sector Administrator Caney at 0351 hours, and Inquisitorial Liaison Zerath at 0347 hours, 2 minutes before the first recorded signature. Metadata analysis reveals administratum templates pushed cluster-wide at 0330 hours, 17 minutes before atmospheric processor failure. The authorization packets bear identical checksums across separate channels, too precise for organic crisis response, perfectly aligned for cogitator distribution. Command was plural on paper. In practice, authority was a preloaded file awaiting execution. Subsection Oblivio arrives with surgical precision, sealing incident reports behind classification barriers within 6 hours of Red Protocol activation. Colonial records undergo systematic redaction as casualty statistics disappear into data vaults, accessible only through clearance levels that technically do not exist. Mirror caches show deletion orders traversing relay stations like infection, replacing incident nouns with budget codes and converting casualty lists into consumption deltas. Kythera 9 undergoes account reconciliation, not systems failure. Deaths recorded as routine attrition rather than emergency elimination through bureaucratic alchemy that converts accountability into efficiency. The crisis reveals budget mathematics rather than mechanical breakdown. Atmospheric and nutritional supply curves, recalculated after the St. Doria's inquisitorial rerouting, demonstrate mathematically impossible sustainability ratios. Colonial life support could not maintain 47,000 prisoners beyond 23.7 standard days without emergency resupply. Calculations that existed weeks before processor failure. Population rebalancing emerges as sanctioned euphemism for calculated murder, predetermined solution treating human elimination as acceptable operational adjustment. The euphemism deserves translation. Oxygen availability divided by prescribed labor needs yields headcount. Everything above that number converts into absence using least resource-intensive means available. Vardak cluster analysis confirms pattern over anomaly across 17 facilities. Oceanus Purgata experienced pressure system failures, eliminating 12,000 prisoners during transport delays. Mordian Tertius reported acid containment breaches, reducing population by 8,900 souls during supply shortfalls. Torquay 7's overheating coolant plant coincided with tithe recalculation. Red Protocol She, culling 12% the week Navy requisitions stripped replacement parts. Each incident follows standardized templates: equipment failures, emergency protocols, population optimization, subsection Oblivio classification. No villains need cackle. Spreadsheets execute the cruelty through systematic policy disguised as coincidental crisis. The primary twist emerges through redemption lottery analysis. Winners process not toward spiritual salvation, but penal legion intake facilities, where explosive anklets replace neural collars and combat indoctrination supplants industrial compliance. Military recruitment operates through manufactured desperation. Prisoners volunteer for service in the Emperor's sight. Without understanding, they choose between death by asphyxiation and death in combat. The lottery's synchrony with purges is integration, not coincidence. Emergency calls lower atmospheric load, while survivors feed regiments whose survival expectations mirror the colonies, single digits, rounded down. Imperial mercy reveals itself as logistics pipeline, where chaplain's benediction becomes routing code and prayer becomes signature. Manufactured desperation produces volunteers. Red protocol produces vacancies. Administratum templates produce legality. Together they convert crisis into strategic resource allocation across war fronts that cannot admit their appetite. In public ledgers, human suffering refined into military assets through institutional design rather than administrative failure. How do survivors adapt to systems designed for systematic erasure? What becomes of penal legionnaires once explosive anklets click and transports disappear into warp space? Survival under systematic erasure breeds economies measured in heartbeats and contraband salt. On post-purge Kithra 9, algae salt supplements scraped from biovat edges trade at 4 oxygen credits per gram, precious electrolytes preventing cardiac arrest during extended shifts where atmospheric processors strain under reduced capacity. Stimulant tabs carved from industrial solvents circulate through work gangs, crude methamphetamine derivatives synthesized in cooling pipes where temperatures stabilize chemical reactions. A finger-sized tab purchases 12 hours of quota-beating productivity, paid for through weeks of systematic malnutrition as bodies burn reserves faster than rations can replace them. Women's work gangs, designated auxiliary processors in administratum logs, rotate sleep shifts in thermal conduits coiled around atmospheric processor stacks, measuring safety by pipe temperature and machine psalm tempo. Access costs bribes paid to tech adepts in memorized hymn fragments, binary catechisms recited perfectly enough to earn 4-hour shelter privileges, while machinery cycles. These transactions exist in regulatory gray zones where spiritual instruction permits undefined boundaries, survival commerce disguised as religious devotion. Medical care operates through information barter systems where diagnosis costs confession and treatment demands betrayal. Medic Servitor Kappa 9 dispenses antibiotic paste for reports about contraband movement, surgical thread for details about work slowdowns, pain suppressants for names of potential lottery volunteers. A surgeon trades sutures for patrol schedules while penitent sergeants charge 10 hymn verses for analgesic ampules verses recorded by microphones that never forget. Survival taxes escalate through self-incrimination as informant networks manufacture mutual suspicion. Confession quotas imposed during forced penance cycles demand invented sins where real transgressions prove insufficient. Prisoners learn systematic accusation. I thought of escape for 6 breaths. I pocketed 3 grams of slag. The Vox altar logs contrition and compliance data, while overseers translate fabricated sorrow into ration tears. Suspicion becomes currency more stable than oxygen. Fear circulates like atmospheric poison. Corpses represent the colony's most reliable banking system. Death yields value through Mechanicus reclamation protocols treating mortality as resource misallocation. Hearts, livers, marrow, tagged, VAT processed, and returned as atmospheric credits on cogitator ledgers, only machine choirs read. Bones grind to calcium for ferrocrete additives, while rendered fat becomes machinery lubricants. Families negotiate corpse rights for atmospheric supplements, lungs worth 12 hours of supplemental oxygen, liver tissue buying week-long ration increases, skeletal calcium purchasing burial space rather than industrial disposal. Prisoner Designation 47 Gamma maintains a contraband ledger scratched into aluminum sheeting with wire stylus, his amateur accounting revealing hidden mathematics. Redemption numbers list alongside debt calculations. RN 3912/19.3, 2 oxygen credits advanced, 1 penance. RN 8201/44.1, lottery eligible, -3 confessions. RN 0045/02.7, medical loan, morgue collateral pledged. The numbers function as spiritual scores and logistics codes simultaneously, high scorers receiving lottery invitations, while low scorers face atmospheric adjustment during random equipment failures. Human resilience manifests through adaptation that would horrify civilized populations. Children sleep standing in work formations, conserving body heat through proximity while maintaining productivity appearance. Adults develop enhanced methane tolerance through gradual exposure, physiological modification creating expertise purchasable only through brutalization. Social bonds form around shared degradation, protection networks, resource sharing, collective memory preservation despite memoriam protocols. Yet every adaptation feeds the system's appetite for useful intelligence. Survival networks become surveillance targets. Resource sharing generates contraband flow data. Memory preservation creates blackmail opportunities. Work songs hide counter rhythms, marking patrol gaps, while knotted rags signal vent open or collar quiet. The system metabolizes rebellion with mechanical efficiency. Complaint becomes morale telemetry. Rumor enables predictive policing. Hymn volume fluctuations tell tech priests where to tighten atmospheric controls. Even 47 Gamma's ledger, if discovered, would scan into supply chain efficiencies and arrest algorithms. How do redemption numbers encode both spiritual assessment and military logistics within shadow market transactions? What institutional mechanisms systematically profit from these survival taxes, converting human desperation into quantifiable imperial resources? Chapel Sanctum Tertius fills with the desperate mathematics of hope as night. Cycle approaches, harsh lumens reflecting off the ceremonial relic chains, ward absolution's edge planted upright before the vox altar, its adamantine teeth stained with centuries of sacramental blood, gleam like promises while 847 prisoners kneel in numbered rows on cold ferrocrete. Servo skulls drift overhead on whispering fans, their auspex arrays counting attendance for cogitator systems that cross-reference redemption numbers with military requisition quotas arriving from off-world commissariat offices. Chaplain Mordax intones the litany of second chances through vox grills wired to atmospheric processors, his words riding recycled air into every corner of Kithra 9's failing infrastructure. Candidates recite penances of iron in ragged unison. By toil we are cleansed. By service we are redeemed. By death we achieve absolution, their voices creating acoustic compliance, while hidden microphones measure sincerity through harmonic fluctuation analysis. Behind reinforced glass, commissariat clerks process requisition forms with practiced efficiency, styluses converting prayer into logistics codes as mortality projections calculate acceptable loss ratios for active deployment zones. The selection ritual proceeds with mechanical precision disguised as divine intervention. Each candidate recites designation, offense record, current quota performance, and redemption number, while clerks compare vocal stress patterns to data slates mapping spiritual scores to officio perfectus intake requirements. Prisoner 47 Gamma, his amateur ledger-keeping skills, noted in administrative margins, receives approval through algorithms weighing productivity against projected combat utility. A nod becomes a stamp becomes a body counted for transport manifests, listing ammunition and flesh on identical inventory lines. Neural collars unlock with blessed triplet chimes as Tech Priest Vex Gamma chants binary benedictions, each release recorded through bone density scans and scar pattern recognition. Explosive anklets replace the familiar weight of collar mesh. Heavier restraints bearing officio perfectus sigils and proximity detonators calibrated for battlefield deployment rather than atmospheric control. The anklets click into place with finality that sounds like prayer, but functions as inventory management. Their red LEDs bleeding through dust like electronic stigmata. Winners receive tin Aquilas stamped from portable dies, crude icons bearing scratched numerals indicating deployment zones where survival expectations round optimistically towards single digits. Tattoo servitors inscribe regimental markings using blessed ink mixed with ceramite dust. 19th Penal Legion, 44th Redemption Battalion, 3rd Expendable Assault Company. Each mark serves as routing code disguised as spiritual elevation, prisoner designations converting to military assets through sacramental logistics. The ceremony transforms 47 Gamma into Penal Legionnaire, 47 Gamma-19, his accounting. Skills redirecting toward ammunition tallies and casualty reports in war zones where mathematics reduce to simple subtraction. Transport preparation reveals conscription's true nature through administrative precision. Winners march in shackled formations toward orbital lighters while redemption hymns mask explosive anklet synchronization protocols. Their destination isn't freedom, but deployment to active combat zones where penal legions serve as expendable shock troops, mine clearers, and human shields for regular Imperial Guard formations requiring deniable casualties. For remaining prisoners, the ritual functions perfectly despite its deceptive nature. Hope ventilates through chapel ceremonies, moderating behavior colony-wide, as inmates compete for lottery eligibility through increased productivity, reduced infractions, and voluntary confession quotas. The system achieves optimal efficiency by converting desperation into voluntary military recruitment while delivering steady supplies of bodies to external wars requiring expendable flesh. The moral inversion completes itself through institutional design rather than corruption. Faith didn't fail the imperial system. It succeeded at its designed purpose of manufacturing consent for systematic human consumption. Redemption becomes recruitment. Salvation becomes conscription. Spiritual elevation becomes logistics pipeline feeding conflicts that cannot admit their appetite in public documentation. The machinery of controlled oblivion operates through sacramental efficiency, converting human suffering into military assets while maintaining plausible deniability through religious ceremony. As transport bays seal and orbital craft disappear into warp space, two questions echo through recycled atmosphere. Commissariat requisitions cross-reference subsection Oblivio classifications before vanishing into sealed ledgers. Who profits from institutional amnesia surrounding these operations? And somewhere beyond Kithra 9's failing orbital defenses, the black barge St. Doria never completed her scheduled resupply run, her 4,000 souls processed through systems designed to leave no records. What war required those vanished lives more urgently than breath itself? The ecosystem feeding on penal colonies operates not as conspiracy, but as choreography of offices, each extracting value precisely because the others provide institutional distance. Administratum subdirectorates transmute labor hours into tithe credits through actuarial tables converting ore tonnage and manufactorum output into imperial obligation satisfied. Subsection Oblivio protocols engineer plausible deniability through compartmentalized reporting. Form AIX/Oblivio replaces casualty figures with consumption deltas while leaving productivity totals intact. Auditors see compliance where census would reveal absence. On ledger sheets, nothing dies. Only deficits close through systematic erasure that converts accountability into efficiency. The Adeptus Mechanicus treats colonies as controlled laboratories where equipment and flesh can be broken without litigation or compensation claims. Extreme condition prototypes cycle through live operational trials. Pressure suits tested on Oceanus Purgata's crushing depths. Acid-resistant servo housings proven under Mordian Tertius's corrosive rain. Collar mesh firmware iterations refined through Kythera 9's methane atmosphere. Human-machine interface experiments hide beneath pious labels of catechetical conditioning and devotional biofeedback, producing technical manuals later distributed as standard across the segmentum. Sanctuary protocols protect experimental cohorts rather than the weak. Test populations require continuity for data validation. Reclamation rights ensure no outcome becomes waste. Organ mass feeds biovats. Bone dust hardens ferrocrete. Cognition studies generate research sold to commissariat training facilities. Imperial Navy operations utilize colonies as strategic way stations. The charts refuse to name. Fuel barges skim promethium from hidden orbital silos, while void yards quietly draw conscripts for transfer hulks that never make parade formations. Water prisons like Oceanus Purgata see volumes diverted to naval ballast reservoirs, shortfalls recorded as atmospheric evaporation, when hazardous retrievals or mine clearance operations require deniable manpower. Requisition codes reference Oblivio sites whose populations cannot lodge complaints because officially they do not exist. Officio Perfectus files reveal standardized drawdowns from Oblivio classified facilities feeding off-register military formations. Penal cohorts attached to task forces whose designations never stabilize long enough for historical record. Redemption allotment schedules read like liturgical documents, calculated bodies for breach duty, wire-cutting operations, minefield clearance until explosive devices stop responding. Commissars receive catechisms tuned for these expendable units, while chaplains distribute homilies converting fear into forward momentum. The Black Barge St. Doria exemplifies systematic resource reallocation disguised as administrative irregularity. Inquisitorial rerouting orders diverted her transponder codes beyond tithe charts toward an undocumented battlespace wrapped in quarantine cordons. Her cargo of 4,000 prisoners and 6 months of atmospheric supplements transferred through temporary intake facilities designed for rapid processing and complete erasure. Final transmission bursts, scrap code laced and time-stamped, show material transfer to Navy lighters at coordinates that no longer appear in navigation databases. 4,000 souls became ammunition expenditure without triggering oversight protocols. Case studies demonstrate pattern over anomaly. Hydros Beta's catastrophic decompression provided debris recovery data, while its 23,000 inhabitants processed into naval ballast through biological refinement. Xylos Prime suffered plague outbreak, coinciding with massive guard requisitions. Its population transferred for rapid combat indoctrination before deployment against orc incursions, requiring human wave tactics. Torque 7's accidental deorbit during salvage trials generated improved tractor algorithms while casualty lists disappeared behind Oblivio classification. The system reveals optimization through institutional amnesia rather than corruption. Each department extracts maximum utility while maintaining bureaucratic distance through compartmentalized responsibility, where no office bears moral weight for collective brutality. The machinery operates through designed forgetfulness, classification protocols converting systematic consumption into invisible efficiency, human suffering refined into strategic resources through administrative fragmentation that eliminates accountability while maximizing extraction from punishment infrastructure. If erasure represents systematic policy rather than oversight failure, what traces remain of consumed lives and worlds? What survival wisdom can transmit between throats and ventilation systems without triggering surveillance networks that convert speech into sanction?